Introverts are often told that they need to be louder to lead, more outgoing to succeed, more visible to advance. But what if that narrative was completely wrong? Today's guest has spent over 20 years proving that you don't need to be loud to lead, and that you don't need to shout to be heard. Greg Wenger is a technologist, a product executive, and a Stanford-trained thinker who blends engineering, storytelling in such a way that makes complexity feel simple.
So there's a natural inclination of an introverted leader to pause and think. We want to think things through and before we react. So that's one of the definitions of introversion. You think before you speak.
He has helped scale startups more than tenfold, led high-performing teams, and built digital products that have transformed industries, all while staying true to his introverted nature. Today, we are diving into the power of introverts in a world that wouldn't shut up. If you have ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated just because you are not the loudest person in the room, this conversation might just change your perspective about leadership. Greg, take us back to the beginning. When did you first realize that you were an introvert, and how did that knowledge eventually shape who you are in terms of leadership today?
Sure. So when did I realize I was an introvert? I knew what it was before I had the terminology. I mean, I think I always, as soon as, certainly in grade school, just being on the bus, I knew I was a quieter person. I didn't have terms for this, I had, when I was in I think it was probably third grade, getting really excited to have an answer and then raising my hand, and suddenly I would get overwhelmed about, all the things, what was I going to say, and then, I would go blank in those situations, and then they thought, okay, does he have a stutter? What's wrong with this guy? And so it wasn't that. It was just that my mind would get overwhelmed when I was really excited, and then there was some kind of pressure to talk about things. And so I had sort of an inkling earlier on. I get into, go through college, all these things. I get out into the working world, and I gravitated toward a profession that was more, suitable for someone who's a little bit quieter. I was doing computer programming, but I, very quickly I got frustrated with the way things were run. We'd get assignments, and I said, well, this doesn't make sense, and I wanted to start having more of an influence. I realized that this was something I wanted to do and something that I could contribute more of. And so I started speaking up more, and I started trying to seek out, how do I become a manager? And I found that I wasn't encouraged. People was like, you? They just didn't see me as a leader, because we have these cultural ideas about a leader is loud and boisterous and taking up a bunch of space in the room. And the people who are encouraged in that path, or those are the people who are displaying that kind of behavior, the extroverts. And so, but I still felt strongly I have things to contribute. So I ended up finding my own way of doing these things in leading, and it was through more one-on-one conversations at first, and it was through picking and gradually becoming more comfortable with speaking up as these opportunities arose. Fast forward to I'm on executive teams, and I had some really, really challenging people. So it was one thing to work with engineers and product people, and it's another thing with these loud sales and marketing people. And some of the most extroverted people are out there. And so I had to do some additional work. I had to get some coaching, that kind of stuff. And all along, I had this idea in my head that it wasn't okay to be an introvert. I was like, that's not me. I was in denial about this. I was like, I got to fix this. And so that was my attitude about it. And I finally came to realize that this is who I am. This is how I'm wired. And that's fine. I just need to figure out my operating instructions. How do I do my best in these situations, even these really confrontational situations where, there are ways to operate. And so I learned those. and there's a lot of great information out there. And I saw my role as I want to help amplify that. I want to get the word out to people. So when you're starting out in your career, you're 25, 30 or whatever it is, and you're interested in this, you see the examples and the information, so you can save some of the trouble that I went through.
Wow, that's really amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, like you rightly talked about, you grew to get into the top leadership of a sector that, was closely suited for the kind of personality. You were the very quiet person, the introverted person. But when you wanted to get into the leadership, you started, doing a lot of things around there. Now, apart from what other people thought about you, in the fact that you were not the very extroverted type, so why would you be thinking about it? Speak to us a bit more about some of the internal battles that you had to fight. I know you talked about it very briefly there, but for someone that is probably in the same shoes as well, incidentally, I'm also one of the very introverted persons, right? And a lot of people see me doing a lot of, speaking and all of that today, and they're wondering, but how can we relate to that? So speak to us for someone that may be introverted like that. What kind of battles did you have to fight internally, and how did you overcome those battles to get to where you were or to where you are right now? Because also, obviously, you're in senior leadership right now. You do a lot of, leading and talking in public. So how did you get to that point? What battles did you face internally?
Yeah, well, I think just broadly speaking, there's this idea of imposter syndrome where, can I do this? Am I good enough? And it's really challenging at first. And so the way I went about that, and the way I recommend anybody goes about this, is confidence comes from proving competence to yourself. And so, you start out very small. And, that's really where I started out. I started out in my teams, and, small team meetings, people are peers, and I might feel uncomfortable raising my hand and pointing things out or speaking up. But then, I challenged myself to do that, and you do that more and more. And then you get some comfort there. And it's just always, I consistently pushed myself to go a little bit more, just a little bit further than where I was that day. Then maybe there's a larger group, or a group with a more senior leader in there where, all the silence, the room goes silent, and then all the eyes are on you, right? And you're speaking. At first, I would just have a lot of self-consciousness about that, and it was almost like I was aware of my tongue in my mouth. It's hard to speak, and so that was really challenging for me. And so sometimes when I first started presenting to senior leaders in my company, I would get anxiety, in maybe a day or two leading up to it. And the night before, I would just have these fear responses. And so that it's something that I really had to look at and understand, okay, where is this coming from? And then actually develop some tools to manage that, do breathing exercises. Breath work is amazing tool for any kind of fear response. But then, it's really gradual exposure. And I also want to point out here that anxiety that I'm describing is not necessarily inherent to someone who's an introvert. So there's introversion and there's shyness. And so introversion is really about how you manage your energy and where you draw your energy from. And that these large rooms are going to be draining for you because you're thinking about everything, you're processing everything very deeply, from everything everybody's saying, to the lighting, to the ambient, the room. You're just taking in all the different emotions of everybody's. You're doing tons of internal processing, and that's super draining. And especially so the bigger the room that you're in. But that's one thing. So any introvert is going to be drained by that kind of situation, no matter what. What is different from that and separate, distinct, is shyness and this fear that I'm describing. And so that fear can be a lot of it is fear of public speaking, social anxiety. It can be, it's fear of failure. There's just any kind of fear. Fear of snakes. These are all similar things, and there's great reframes out there too. But one of the ways to deal with it is this progressive exposure that I was talking about. You build up and you build up a little bit more, and then suddenly you look down and you're like on top of a mountain. Takes some time. But there's also another really interesting point about fear, where it's the physical sensation. If you're thinking about the physical sensation of fear, then that is actually indistinguishable from excitement. What's different is you're thinking about it, you're framing your mental frame of that. And so you can reframe a lot of those physical responses like, boy, I'm really excited. I really want this to go well. And understanding and accepting that some of that is always going to be there. Anytime I raise my hand in a room to this day, I feel a little bit of excitement. Yeah, there's arousal, and it's just because I care, and it's because I want to get my point across. I want to do well, but I don't consider that fear. And usually, that as soon as I get absorbed in talking to whoever it is, that passes.
That's impressive. Thank you so very much. As you were talking, I was just thinking about it. There's this stereotype that leaders are supposed to be the charismatic and the extroverted ones, but you believe that even the introverted leaders are equally as effective. Or are there cases where being introverted in leadership is even more effective than the extroverted ones? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways is, so that there's a natural inclination of an introverted leader to pause and think, and they want to think things through, and before we react. So that's one of the definitions of introversion. You think before you speak. And so if that's your natural inclination, over time you can be pretty assured that you are coming up with better decisions and better responses. The other thing it's important to know as a leader is that you don't know everything. And so instead of leaping out with your opinion, introverted leaders are much more inclined to read the room, get everybody's take on that. And, I think there's a natural humility there. And I say that in a positive sense. It's very positive to me to be aware of the fact that you don't know everything and that you're not God's gift to the world. It's an attractive quality in a leader. And so I think that makes, it's between the ability to reflect and then the ability to understand and connect with the people there that makes introverted leaders more trusted and make better decisions over time. I think that you think of some examples. There's prominent examples. You can point to Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. These are kind of exceptions, unfortunately, in the senior leadership, because we don't trust that, and it's really unfortunate. We, especially in the Western world, especially in America, we're so bought into this myth of this extroverted leader. And this idea is entirely culturally determined. You go back into the 18th century earlier, in America even, and that wasn't the case. How did Abraham Lincoln get elected? Actually, we've had a number of introverted presidents recently, but I've made it a policy not to talk about anyone in politics, less than 100 years ago, because it's guaranteed to offend somebody.
Thank you so very much. One of the foremost leaders of leadership, or one of the foremost thought leaders around leadership, is John Maxwell, and he always describes leadership as influence. Now, for you to be able to influence someone either positively or negatively, you need to be able to communicate effectively with them. So let's speak a bit about communication now. One of your key themes is holding the floor without raising your voice. So what are your top strategies for speaking in a way that resonates without raising your voice?
Great question. So the first thing is preparation, and that's something I'm it comes naturally to a lot of introverts, but particularly for leaders who are entering in situations which may be uncomfortable, the more prepared you feel, the more comfortable you're going to feel. So I will, to this day, will almost always prepare bullet points of topics I want to cover in any situation, even if it's a kind of a smaller meeting, a smaller setting. Bigger meetings, if you're a leader, then they really benefit. Everybody benefits if you can put energy into planning out that meeting and an agenda. Give people the chance to think about what we're going to talk about and discuss in advance. That provides a huge advantage to your fellow introverted folks because that's when they do their best thinking, not in the middle of a meeting or put on the spot. Extroverts, they love that. They kind of thrive in that environment. Even extroverts will make better contributions if they think in advance. So that's one thing. So preparation for yourself, for your people. The next thing, I think it takes a lot of practice. Gaining comfort in these situations. Another suggestion that I give to people is volunteer to lead meetings, because it gives you a role to fill. Everyone's expecting you to talk and intercede and come to decisions, move the discussion along. It's kind of throwing yourself off the cliff in a certain sense. But it's weirdly takes the stakes out of it, I have no choice but to do this. And in some ways that can take pressure off you because you're just filling a role. It's not about you. It's not any of your internal hangups. Am I talking too much? No, you have to talk. So it's really clear there. But what that does is it gives you a platform, an opportunity to practice speaking and communicating. And so that's a second thing. There's another one. When you're creating presence, a lot of it has to do with your voice. And so a lot of this is online, but especially when you're in rooms, be conscious. Are you using your full voice? And you can tell you're using your full voice when it's really resonant in your chest. And you have to be breathing. This is a very important thing to be conscious of. So you have to be breathing in order to communicate and use your full resonant voice. So you've got to be conscious of that and watch for that. And that's tricky, especially if things get heated. And so that's where, I think we might come to confrontation, which is another big challenge. But it's easier to work on how you're communicating and expressing your presence throughout the room or even over the video waves when it's a little bit lower stakes or just it's not as there's nothing challenging or upsetting about that environment. But I find that working on that part of it is important. Your voice, it embodies you. It carries your meaning, your intent. It carries what you have to offer to other people. So it's worth being conscious of and paying attention to.
Wow, those are some very, very valuable tips that you're giving there. And I'm going to stay a bit on the part of thinking in the mindset of the introverted, because like I said, I personally am an introverted person myself. So I'm thinking along the lines of introverted people that are watching this right now. One thing that often happens many times is for the introverts, they are trying to mimic the extroverts in meetings and in conversations, just so because they feel that's the way to go. So what's your perspective on that? And for someone that does that, what advice would you be giving to them in that light?
That's a great question and point, and I've done a lot of that. Particularly before I had more awareness about this, you feel like you have to, jump in with your opinion, and there's value. There's a lot of value in picking your spots, picking your moments, and so it's important to realize and to know that you can have a huge impact while staying silent for huge portions of any kind of setting, any kind of meeting. It could be business, could be a social interaction. There's a phrase I heard someone use, which I love. It's let the puppies tire themselves out. So like sometimes there's a lot of energy about things and people be going back and forth, and you know, it's really challenging for me as an introvert because I'm thinking before I'm speaking to break in, to cut in, because I'll have a point and then by the time I'm ready to talk about it, they're like a beat or two ahead. And so that's kind of the kernel of the challenge that introverts, I think, have in these situations. And so, but there will be a point in the meeting, or maybe you're making an observation about things. You have an idea about how can you help things along. You can do two things. One, you can ask a question, and it's a powerful question. And you can say, is this the goal of what we're talking about here, or is it this? You know, or is like, you can make an observation. I've noticed we're talking a lot about this topic, but here's really the central concern. And so someone jumping in with these kinds of observations can really put everybody on track. In a sense, you can actually guide the group to your way of thinking just by asking a question or making an observation, something like that. And so that's, I think, a kind of a superpower trick that introverts can have, because we're the ones sitting on the sidelines kind of thinking through all of this. So it doesn't work always, but that is a powerful way to participate in these situations.
Thank you very much, Greg. I mean, so there you go, introverts. Greg is giving you some fantastic superpower tricks that you can use to stand out in those meetings. Now, speaking about influence or strategies to leadership, one of the effective things of leadership or to grow in leadership is networking, which doesn't come naturally to introverts, right? So they are they are at events, but they are struggling to network with other people. Meanwhile, this comes naturally to the extroverts and all of that. So how would you recommend that introverts get to have meaningful connections without draining themselves in the process as well?
Right. So one of the things is, we go back to managing your energy. So a networking event, we know in advance, is going to be a draining kind of event for us. So leave some time, don't overdo it before. Make sure you're rested when you go into it. Number two, pace yourself while you're in there. I might go for half hour, 45 minutes, and then get up, walk around, go get a drink, visit the restroom, walk around, and then either come back or failing that, if you just feel drained, bow out early. It's really understanding, I just have a limited amount of energy for this kind of environment because, like I said, the brain's, working in overdrive and working overtime during that time. So I might make sure that I can take a walk or take a rest or just bow out, without, at a reasonable time, maybe it's, I go for an hour or an hour and a half or something, but you're not going for 3 hours and then going to a bar afterwards, or, it's like, understand you're just wired differently and that's okay. Or you can take a break and then come back, catch up with the group after that. But it's that energy management is a huge part of it. Okay, now how do we talk to people? How do we meet people? And, to gain comfort with that sort of thing, it helps to bring what I call a wingman, someone who's very comfortable in, starting up these kinds of conversations. Bring an ally, and then they might, broker the conversation, and then say, oh yeah, what do you think? And then, you kind of join in naturally. The other part is to realize that it's totally fine to just go up there and stand there and just listen in and wait for an opportunity that sounds interesting to you. Something that you can genuinely connect on, and eventually you'll find someone who's inclined like you, and you'll end up having really good conversations. There's a whole other art to networking, which make sure that you get their contact information or LinkedIn, and then follow up and kind of nurturing those conversations. I think that's the part that nurturing the connection after that. That's a part that introverts are more comfortable with. We're fine on social media, we're fine working through computers, and we're great with a one-on-one conversation or in a very small group conversation. It's really these larger groups, which, it's not our strong suit. And sorry, introverts, if you're an introvert, that's not something you can, you can overcome your social anxiety, but just the dynamic of working and the fact that drains you, that's not something we can get rid of.
Thank you so much. As you were speaking there, I was just recalling some of my own early days as well. So that was one of the things I used to struggle with. I could be in a large meeting and I'll be absolutely quiet and not say anything. And then I go into one-on-one conversations with some of those people I meet at those meetings, and it's a totally different thing. And they're wondering, is this not the same person? So one-on-one conversations behind the screens, on telephone, it was easy to have those conversations. But just in a large group, I would just rather be quiet. And, it took a while for me to be able to get into where I am right now because of the kind of work that I do now. I do a lot of coaching and training and public speaking, so I have to be more extroverted. But I remember how it is that I started. Now, next thing I wanted to ask about is not something particularly concerned to just the extroverts, so to the introverts rather, to everybody as well. And that's the thing about visibility. Some people feel, well, I'm good enough at my job and my job should speak for me. Right? But we're living in the world where the loudest voices are the ones that get promoted and because are the ones that are seen and things like that. So what do you have to say about this? Is it okay to, like I said, my job speaks for me. I don't need to put myself out there. And some people will feel that putting myself out there is, it's being proud. It's let things just take their natural course. What do you feel about this, and what advice would you be giving around this?
I think it really comes down to what is the influence that you want to have. What's the impact that you want to have on your company, on your family, on the community, in the world? And recognizing that you have just as much value, your voice, your ideas have just as much value as people who are promoting themselves. What does that mean? What are you going to do about it? So you've got to, if you want to have that impact and you're an introvert, you're going to have to make yourself uncomfortable and challenge yourself. Okay, maybe this doesn't come natural to me. This feels weird, awkward. It's not my natural inclination, but I'm going to challenge myself to put it out there because I care so much more about helping people than any discomfort I might have in the situation. And that's really, to me, I have a podcast myself, similar to you, and I struggled with that visibility, especially in the beginning, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable looking at yourself on a screen, hearing your voice, editing yourself, and seeing all the words that you mess up, and all the imperfections that you might have. And that's something where, okay, I've got to get used to this. If I'm going to get out there, I'm going to get my voice, my ideas out there. And I think you can apply that to any situation.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. In your position in leadership right now, I'm sure you would have worked with people that you can see yourself as when they were their age. So what I'm saying is, you've worked with your team members where you see someone that is very introverted and maybe it might be affecting the performance. So if you had someone like that on your team, if you had an example about that, you can tell us about it. What did you do to support the person? But if you have not, if you had someone like that on your team, someone that is introverted rather, they have the capacity, they have the potential, but because of that introvertedness, it's probably going to affect certain things. What would you do to support them so that other leaders as well can pick out these traits? First of all, how do you identify those traits? And if you do, how can you support them?
Yeah, I have a very intuitive sense when I see somebody who's quieter. You have an idea. I think these are the people I gravitated to when I was in grade school. They're quieter, and you just know. And then you start having the one-on-one conversation, and then it's very natural. I've had many people that I've mentored or have reported to me who I've helped out with this, and a lot of it depends on what are they trying to do, what are they trying to accomplish. Do they want to speak out more? I find almost everybody likes to be heard. They like to have their voice heard. Not everybody is up for the big public speaking, being on stage, being in front of hundreds of people. But maybe it's wherever it is, wherever your level of discomfort is on your journey. If you have something in you where you feel like, actually, I do have something to say here, if only I could, or I'd really like to, then I encourage them to take, the tiniest step that feels tolerable to them, and just approach it systematically. Some people are really upfront and they never want to stand up as the leader. But even those people want to have an influence and are more comfortable, say, in writing. So maybe you never raise your hand in a meeting, you never, put yourself out there in that way. But afterward, you write up an email or you put in like a chat message, a Slack message, you post it to the group and say, I've been thinking about this, here's my idea, or here's my drawing of, my conception of what this is. And so I just want to be really clear about this. That is leadership. And if there's any one message I really want to send to anyone's listening to this, is that regardless of title, you all have the opportunity to lead every single day. And it's by pointing things out, it's by raising your hand and saying, hey, this meeting has gone on for, an hour and 15 minutes. Like we could all use a break. When you do that, as a quieter person, you're speaking for everybody, like at least half the people in the room, and probably most everybody, because introverts are people who have sensitivity, that we're tuned into things that people who are, they impact other people, but they're just less aware of them. And so that's an opportunity to lead. And so that's what I would encourage everyone. Look for those opportunities to lead. Look for the things there where there's a voice in you saying, I really think it should be this way. That's something that is going to help other people. So be of service and make it about the other person. Thinking like, who can I help by doing this? Kind of turn the spotlight away from you onto other people. Like it's really about them. Like, how can you help other people? And that makes it better, makes it possible.
Thank you so very much for all of those tips. One of the things I help people to do is to scale to multiple figure lifestyles without sacrificing time, family, or freedom. Now, you're someone that has been able to scale to multiple figures. You're leading a large organization, you're leading a large team, and you've done a high turnover, right? In your own perspective or in your own experience, what would you say are the most effective leadership skills that would help you to scale to multiple figures, to scale to, that top tier leadership in your own experience? What would your skills be?
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about foundational skills and, talking with people. At a certain point, I needed to layer in some additional skills, which was about dealing with confrontation, becoming more decisive, and just the way I communicate. I think those three things. So the number one, inevitably people run into conflict. And I used to have a different way of dealing with conflict, which was I would avoid it. I would figure out a way around it, or it would come out, my opinion would come out sideways. And I've really turned a full 180 on that, because I just realized how much more efficient, how much better everyone's life is, how much better life is for me if I go directly to the source of the conflict. Two people aren't getting along in a team. Let's talk about it. Let's have it out. Like, we would create that environment to do it. And I think that people avoid conflict because they've seen bad examples of conflict. They've seen unhealthy conflict. Conflict can be incredibly healthy. It can be incredibly respectful. I think it's those examples of disrespectful conflict. They're all over the place. We don't have to talk about what that looks like. But they're very, and it can be very kind. Is the other thing. Is like, I just simply disagree with you about this. Let's talk about why. This is why I feel so passionately about this. And you have it out, and it can increase understanding. So study nonviolent communication is one of the works you think about or look about into that. But getting used to getting comfortable with conflict, and then actually going the step beyond that is seeking it out. That's really the next level. That is what makes things far more efficient and sets you up for scaling in the way that you're talking about. It's also a recipe for really great relationships. With family relationships. It's relationships with your mate, your partner.
Very good. I'm happy you did talk about relationships there. So let's stick there for a bit. So imagine a scenario where you had maybe a partner and you're both introverts in that relationship. How would you deal with such a case, right? Because you have that kind of scenario. I mean, so first of all, is it recommended for introverts to get together like that, get to be spouses and everything? Is it recommended? And if in case some people are already, maybe they're married and in a relationship already, they're both introverted, how would you recommend they deal with such a situation?
Well, I hope so. I'm not allowed to opine on whether my wife is an introvert or an extrovert, but suffice it to say, it better be okay for two introverts to become partners. But it does pose challenges, and I think a lot of it is both people being internal. You just have to create opportunities for communication and lots of space and room, because I think the extrovert version of everything is talking it out. Everything is verbal, everything is visible. And so that actually calls back to one of the challenges for introverts as a leader, is that you're used to doing things internally, and then you come up with a conclusion. And the problem with that is that people need to be brought along. People need to see all the steps in your chain of reasoning in order to, it's like, oh, I see where you're coming from. I see where you got to that. If you just start at point C or D or E, people are like, what? How'd you get from there? And that was actually one of my experiences in the senior leadership when starting out there, where I'd say, this is what we need to do. And then people are like, okay. And then they were back on point A and B and still hashing that out. And I said, what's going on? I have the answer over here. Why are we talking about this? But it's a similar thing in the partner dynamic, where especially if both people are processing internally, you just need to give a lot of space to do that. And then I think both sides need to learn to verbalize what they're going through, with emotionally and their thinking, and that creates that mutual understanding of which all people need. We just are always going to be coming from different places and have different takes on things, and so figuring out how to do introvert communication is what I call it.
Introverted communication, fantastic. So do you actually think two introverts as partnering up like that is a recipe for disaster?
Oh, no, it's fantastic. So, if you like to be, it's the same, I pose it back to you. Do you enjoy having conversations with other introverts?
Oh, well, to a large extent, I think I do, because we kind of get to resonate. We get to think about things the same way, process things before speaking and all of that. So I think I actually enjoy conversations better with introverts, because maybe the conversations are more thought-provoking rather than just with a lot of noise, and at the end of it, I'm wondering, what is it we're talking about? So yeah, so that's the pro. So that's the pro side. So to advocate for an introvert-extrovert relationship, it makes things really easy for the introverts in social situations. You go out, and then so the extrovert is just talking, and you can just sit there, and that's your extrovert wingman for life.
ease every social situation you ever have to go to.
That's a plus there. So you have a wingman for life if you're a partner with someone that is an extrovert. Fantastic. All right, Greg, we're enjoying this conversation, but we know we need to let you go very, very, very soon. But just wanted to ask you a question. Imagine you woke up one morning and just about everything we knew about Greg Wenger had been, erased. Probably someone went online and deleted everything we knew about you. No one knew about you. No one had heard about you before. And you literally had to start your career all over again. Now, where are you going to start from this time, and what are you going to do differently this time?
Well, so my career has been wiped out, but presumably I know everything. I still have the experience that I do now. That's the idea, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd probably go straight into teaching. I love to read and learn, but I love to be with people and in a learning environment. So that's probably where I would go. And, I would have started on putting things out there in the public earlier.
Fantastic. You go straight into teaching and you started on putting things into public there earlier. Any last thoughts, comments, or advice for those that are jumping on this podcast right now, particularly those that may be introverted and maybe speaking to the extroverted as well on how to support these people to ensure that we all live in a very harmonious environment? What would those last words be to them?
Yeah, I think one thing we didn't talk about or touch on is that, so I view this focus on introversion as just a waypoint, like a milestone on the way. I think there's tremendous value in looking at all these topics and thinking about all these things and understanding, okay, I am introverted in my behavior, and that means I'm wired this way, understanding yourself. But at a certain point, there's it ceases to have value. You understand yourself, you're in the world, and you don't want any of these things to be limiting you. And just because you're this way and I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean you can't evolve. So your wiring is the same, but this should pose no limitations on what you can do and accomplish in the world. You might just have to figure out slightly different ways that the world thinks that they should be done.
Thank you very, very much. And just to add to that, just in case you're out there listening to this, either you're an introvert or you're an extrovert, I don't believe there's a right or wrong way to be. It's just about understanding your particular nature and how to utilize it or maneuver that situation to deal with the world out there. So you're not right or wrong if you're either introverted or extroverted. That's not the conversation here. Our conversation is just how to identify that and what you can do to help yourself better. Greg, thank you very much. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure to have you on the podcast today, and I'm sure just the way I have enjoyed it, everyone on the podcast has enjoyed this as well. So thank you for taking our time out of a very, very busy schedule to be able to join us on the podcast today. What Greg reminded us of today is that leadership is not about volume, it's about value. It's not about how loudly you speak, but how deeply your words land. It's not about dominating a room, it's about elevating it. Introverts don't need to become extroverts to lead, they need to become more of who they already are. Greg's story is proof that the path to senior leadership doesn't require noise. It requires clarity, it requires confidence and authenticity. Thank you, Greg, for giving a voice to those who usually lead in silence, and for reminding us all that success most times doesn't roar, it whispers. Till I come your way with another edition of the Growth Code podcast, remember, there's greatness on your inside and the world is waiting for you to birth and manifest your greatness. Go out there and be profitable, and I'll see you next time.